All right, let's pick things up right there for tonight's Government Insider. Joining me, Francis Rose, federal government expert, radio host, publisher of francisrose.com, a jack of all trades. Francis, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Horace.
The president went on the air last night, I'm sure the White House would admit, in large part to counter some criticism, to tell the country that the administration really does have a plan to counter ISIS. Did he silence his critics?
Well, it doesn't appear so, because not too long after his speech, David Axelrod, who used to be a pretty key figure in President Obama's White House, was on CNN saying he thought the speech was good, but he didn't really see or hear anything new in the speech. That seems to be the thread that both Republicans and Democrats are saying about the speech. You'd expect the Republican presidential candidates especially to say that there's nothing new here and to criticize President Obama's remarks no matter what he said. But Mr. Axelrod said that, and I thought that was striking because I have noticed a theme there in former Obama administration officials saying that the administration's strategy against ISIS not only isn't working, but isn't likely to work. All of the secretaries of defense who have served President Obama and all of the directors of Central Intelligence who have served President Obama, except for the current ones, have made remarks like that. I wrote a piece about that at francisrose.com. You can read it anytime there, laying out the remarks that Secretary Robert Gates, Leon Panetta, and Chuck Hagel, former secretaries of defense for President Obama, have all said about his ISIS strategy.
It's easy to criticize, but if you don't have a counter, if you don't have an idea, what would they have liked for him to say? What would they like for the administration to be doing?
Well, all of those men have laid out what they believe the administration or the United States should be doing against ISIS. The problem is that in some cases, many cases, those involve putting more people into Syria and Iraq than the president has said he's willing to do. And that's really the crux of where I think this is going to turn, Horace, is when someone in the administration goes to the president and says, look, it's really time, we have to put more people in there, more than 50 special operations people. That will be when we see a dramatic change in what the administration's going to do. Well, whether that happens or not, though, it remains to be seen.
I mean, he said last night the reason that he was reluctant to do that is because the country is weary of war. Mm-hmm. How did the speech play in Peoria, so to speak?
Well, it remains to be seen, I think, because there are the country seems to be about evenly divided among people who think we should be doing more, i.e., boots on the ground, and people who think that we're involved enough already and maybe involved too much. I can't identify, though, a military expert of any ideological stripe that believes that we will have any kind of significant impact against ISIS just by continuing to conduct bombing campaigns. There has to be somebody willing to take on ISIS on the ground, is what all of these strategists tell me. And so far, it's not going to be the United States, obviously, from what the president said last night, and it remains to be seen who it will be then. It doesn't appear any of the European countries are willing to do so either. And so will it be someone in the Middle East themselves, some nation state there, or some other group like the Peshmerga or others? We don't know yet.
Meantime, here in this country, then, we're left with trying to defend ourselves, make sure that we tighten things up. The Department of Homeland Security announcing today a new terror alert system. Secretary Johnson kind of spilling the beans on that at Defense One Forum. What does that mean?
Well, what we know so far is that this system will be an augmentation or an addition to the system that's in place now. Secretary Johnson says that there is currently not a way to let the American people know about what he calls an intermediate threat. And an intermediate threat appears to be along the lines of what we saw in San Bernardino last week. Those kinds of threats are many. They exist all over the country. There are people in all parts of the United States that the FBI is investigating as far as potential terror cells, like what we saw in San Bernardino, people who are lone wolves or very small cells, not necessarily associated with or communicating with on an ongoing basis terrorists in different parts of the world, but certainly have an affinity toward those terrorist groups and maybe a very slight or casual affiliation with them.
Have we done the job at this point of pretty much eliminating the threat of one of those big 9/11 kind of attacks, and now we're just switching and trying to figure out how we can protect ourselves from these soft target attacks like San
Well,
Bernardino.
the people that I talk to that do that for a living say, no, you can never assume that we've eliminated any kind of threat, because certainly the Big Bang is the most appealing to somebody like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, because that's the best way for them to recruit and make more money, to show that they've achieved huge successes like that. So I wouldn't say we've eliminated the possibility. We certainly have devoted a lot of time and resources towards sharing information among all the levels of government and all the levels of law enforcement that can possibly collect information about people. That's why it's less likely, at least, that we'll see a Big Bang than we'll see something like San Bernardino happen again.
Okay, so all of this that we're talking about has cast a huge shadow over something else that is very important, that is looming, and that is the federal budget. The money runs out for the government midnight Friday, unless there's some last-minute funding deal. What's the latest there, and why isn't anybody talking about it? I guess the answer to that question is because of everything else that's going on.
Well, that's one. Yes, that's a good observation, Horace. But another reason that people aren't talking about the shutdown possibility is that it appears to be very, very, very remote. We have leaders on both sides of the aisle, on both chambers of the House of Representatives and the Senate, saying, we don't think this is going to happen. Shutdown plans aren't necessary, one member even said. So the likelihood is that sometime between now and Friday, there is some kind of agreement on how the government will be funded for the rest of fiscal 2016, which would take us through next September, and that it probably won't include any of the riders that are the very divisive issues that we've talked about all up until now.
So just briefly, does that mean we're seeing more cooperation on the Hill?
We're seeing, I think, an understanding that the American people are less willing to put up with the lack of Congress getting its work done than that it has enthusiasm for seeing these divisive issues prevent the work from getting done. Horace.
All right, we end on an up note then. Thank you, Francis.
Thank
Francis
you.
Rose, federal government expert, author, radio host. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Horace.